So basically, the announcement from the Minister on 16 September 2024, which was called Albanese Government Green Lights Most Social and Affordable Housing in Over a Decade. You know about this statement?
I'm aware of it, Senator, yes.
Yeah. And so the government, I think maybe the Prime Minister was even announced, he was involved with this announcement, announced that there would be 13,742 houses built as a result of this press release. Has this arrangement that's been announced by the Prime Minister been finalised yet?
Well, Senator, I won't comment specifically on the Prime Minister's press release. What I will say is that on the 16th of September, Housing Australia released information that though 13,742 homes had been identified as part of preferred projects in funding round one. As I said earlier, we haven't. We're now working to finalise the contracts for those projects, and so we'll release information about each of those projects in line with the requirements under the investment mandate.
Okay, so it hasn't been. So have contracts been signed?
Senator, one contract has now been signed.
Who with?
Well, Senator, we'll be releasing the information about that in line with the requirements under the investment mandate.
So you can't tell us at the moment?
Well, Senator, I can tell you that we'll release the information in line with requirements under the investment mandate.
Yeah. Can I just... Is it right? Can you do that? We'll just check if that's right, if you can do that. Because I think you might have to...
I think possibly to assist... yes, there's a reasonable question, Senator Bragg, about whether or not the official's entitled to not provide that information in those circumstances, but it might be easier if he just takes it on notice at this stage and comes back with a response. Yeah?
Is that...
Yeah, Mr. Langford can take it on notice and consider what information he can provide.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so... Of the 13,000 houses that were promised in this statement back in September by the Prime Minister and the Minister for Housing, you're saying now you've signed one contract in relation to that?
That's correct, Senator.
Okay, and how many others are due to be signed?
So there were 185 projects identified as preferred applications.
Yeah.
And so we've signed one contract.
And how many... Are there 185 contracts?
I might just ask my colleague online, Ms Johnston, just to confirm, but Ms Johnston, are you able to confirm it'll be 185 contracts?
Mr Langford, Rowena Johnston, Chief Credit Officer, I can confirm that there are 185 preferred contracts, so therefore 184 left to execute.
Thank you.
Okay. So a long way to go to finalise.
We're working through the contracts, Senator.
Yeah. And what type of organisations will be involved in these arrangements? Will it be community housing providers as well as other investors?
That's correct, Senator. If I refer to the investment mandate, eligible applicants included states or territories. It included community housing providers. It also included special purpose vehicles that included one of the other categories. There were some other categories of eligible applicants that included those such as an entity that has the primary purpose of improving directly or indirectly housing for Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people, or improving directly or indirectly housing outcomes for members of the Australian Defence Force. There are other requirements in relation to each of those in relation to them being charitable organisations. A special purpose vehicle had to be a constitutional corporation with one of those other categories as a member of that. Okay, and will any of these investors be super funds? Senator, my understanding is that a super fund in its own right is not an eligible applicant under the Housing Australia Future Fund facility or the National Housing Accord facility.
But will they be part of the consortiums that will be bidding or have bid for some of these contracts?
So, Senator, I'm not aware that there are any super funds that have been joined into a consortium. So, of the eligible applicants, we are aware that superannuation funds have provided some support through other vehicles to some of the eligible applicants, but there are, in their own right, they're not eligible applicants.
Okay, so they're part of the overall proposition. They're not individually engaging with Housing Australia.
That's correct, Senator.
And how many super funds would you say are involved providing letters of support and the like?
Senator, I'll refer that question to my colleague, Ms Johnston. I'm not sure if we have that information on hand, noting that relationship between the eligible applicant and their project partners is only based on information they may have disclosed to us in the application.
Okay, well,
but Ms Johnston, do we know the answer to that question?
Thank you, Mr Langford. Senator, we don't have that level of detail. The participation of superannuation funds is usually in relation to the subordinated debt structures within our projects, and we don't have visibility on that. That is subject to further commercial negotiations as we work through the projects.
Okay. So you don't think there's any, you're not aware of any super funds that are involved?
Senator, we're aware that institutional investors, which may include super funds, so for the avoidance of doubts, there are some aggregation vehicles that work with superannuation funds, have provided letters of support to applicants, but as yet applicants haven't entered into arrangements with them, and we haven't finalised arrangements with applicants.
Yeah. Is CBUS one of those, do you know?
Senator, I think we've checked in accordance with the question that you asked most recently, and we're not aware that, or there is no record that CBUS has provided a letter of support to any of the applicants that we're working with.
So when do you think you might actually get going with some of these houses being built that have been announced back in September? I mean, when do you think the houses will be actually completed?
So, Senator, the program target was to commence construction of 40,000 homes over 5 years.
Yeah.
Out of the first round, we anticipate that a number of those will be either delivered or in construction during the course of this financial year. I don't have the exact profile of the completions and commencements this financial year, but happy to take that question on notice if you'd like that level of detail.
So you don't know how many of those 13,742 would be completed in this current financial year?
Ms Johnston, do we have any of that information on hand?
Mr Langford, we don't have the information to hand, but Senator, we do have a requirement within the eligibility criteria under the HAF program that projects must be able to commence within 18 months of contractual close, and also must commence construction or complete construction within 5 years.
Within 5 years? So some of these houses that have been announced back in September this year might not be completed until 2029.
It's better than nothing that happened in 10 years.
We built
of
more
government,
houses than
isn't it?
you, 220,000 houses a year. You're down to 160,000 houses. So
well,
I wouldn't go there if I was you.
This is the biggest
Bragg,
investment
I
in
wouldn't go
social
there
and
if I was you.
affordable housing on
Senator
record,
Bragg,
Senator
if you
Bragg.
want
I
to
wouldn't
try
go
and
there if I was you.
defend, if
The
you want to
numbers
try
are
and
not good for
defend the
you.
previous government's record,
220,000
which was a
You're down to
record of neglect,
160,000.
which was a record of neglect.
You're down to 160,000.
Zero meetings,
The lowest
zero
number.
meetings and engagements with the states. Zero.
More houses than
no
you.
cooperation. And
What's most important? How many houses you built?
Utter neglect. Tradespeople training fell off a cliff. Immigration system completely cactus. The fact that you can smugly sit there and assert that there was something good about that period
More
when
houses.
what it left Australia with
More houses.
was a completely constrained housing system. A completely constrained housing system.
220,000 is
And this
more than
government-
160,000.
This is
almost
about
zero
social and affordable
housing bill.
homes.
Almost zero social housing bill.
About housing.
And this government, after
This is
delay
about social and
from you,
affordable homes.
after delay from you and your colleagues, what has happened here is that the HAF legislation
Well, this is not our
approved
policy.
at the
We
end of
don't
last
agree.
year.
We don't agree with this.
Weeks
It's not our
later,
policy.
weeks later, Well, you don't agree with anything positive that's about building houses for Australians.
Well, we do.
And
We have a supply
and you're sat on
policy,
your
$5
hands.
billion supply policy.
Okay.
The idea that neglect is a good policy framework, which is what your proposition
Well,
was.
it's more house- we
it's
do more
like
houses
an
than
arsonist
you, many
complaining
more.
about the smell of smoke, Senator Bragg.
All right.
It is
Okay.
completely
All right. I'll just
at
see
odds
if-
We'll build more
with
houses
what's
than
happening.
see if
You didn't
Senator-
build anything.
I'll
The
see if-
private sector built it.
I'll
You
s-
sat on your hands.
That's the measure that counts.
You sat
How
on
many
your
houses
hands.
you build?
All right, I'll
You
see
sat
if
on your
Senator
hands.
Bragg.
Government can solve
Okay.
Zero.
All right.
Zero.
Okay.
Zero.
All right. Okay.
As if government can
I'll
solve
just
the
see
problem
if
on its own.
Senator Bragg has
Well,
any
that's why we
I'm
partner with the private
questions
sector.
I'm being
for...
disrupted.
That's
I'll
why we
just
partner
see
with the
if
private
Senator
sector.
Bragg has any more questions before we move to the ABS,
I have many more questions.
who we
Just-
also need to go to. You did tell me you didn't have a lot of questions for Housing Australia, but you have the call.
Well, I mean, I'm trying to be as efficient as I can.
You have the call.
And ask the officials the questions. So, okay, so some of them won't be built until 2029. So it's quite a long time away. So thank you for clarifying that.
Well, that's not what the official said.
Said 5 years from now.
No, what the official said was that the contractual requirements require commencement to start at a particular time and require completion to occur at a particular time. That is not the same as saying that houses won't be completed in 5 years. That's the kind of smug political assertion that I expect from the coalition in this area where there's been utter policy failure for a decade. And now a complaint that it's taken a little bit of time.
More houses
to get
than you.
houses
Thank
built.
you. Okay, let's move on. So let's talk about these institutional investors. So